Hello, disciples. This is your General Minister and President, Terri Hord Owens. I'm delighted to be with you for yet another episode of Imagine with Me, an opportunity that I have to meet and speak with leaders and laity across our church, inviting them to share not only what's going on, but how we can imagine together who we must be as a new church for this incredibly new world. I'm joined today by the Reverend Yvonne Gilmore, Interim Administrative Secretary for the National Convocation of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and Associate General Minister. We're happy to have Reverend Yvonne with us today, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what's happening with the National Convocation. Hello, Yvonne. Welcome. It's good to be with you. Again, as always, people may or may not know that the Interim Administrative Secretary is a part of the staff of the Office of General Minister and President, as well as the leader of the National Convocation. So you and I work together regularly, and it's good to be with you in this forum. I wanted to give you the opportunity to really share with the church, for those who may not know, a little about yourself and particularly about what's happening right now with the National Convocation as you are leading during this interim season.
Absolutely. It is indeed a joy to join you again, as I get to do many things. But let me sort of start at just foundational level in terms of National Convocation and what it is. I am thrilled and have the privilege and joy every day of serving. National Convocation includes really 600 to 700 historically African American congregations in the United States and Canada, and so National Convocation is a beacon of wholeness. Certainly, biennial session takes place every other year, but National Convocation is that entity in partnership with the Office of the General Minister and President, in partnership with merger staff that are a part of Disciples Home Missions, merger staff that serve in the areas of Christian education and faith formation, in evangelism, as well as in Disciples Women's Ministries, that we all work together to serve the whole church, and then specifically to service those needs of those 600 to 700 historically African American congregations. National Convocation of the Christian Church is also connected historically to National Christian Missionary Convention, right, which is that historic entity that actually still exists as a corporate body. It was started in 1917 by Preston Taylor, and so NCMC also is connected to Greenwood Cemetery, which I'll say and just gladly claim, right, that cemetery was started to serve the least of these, right, folks, where not only would they not make space to share, resources in life, but you could not even be buried right at the same cemetery, and so it continues today, and in fact is still the most affordable place to be, to bury your loved ones with dignity in Nashville. But Greenwood Cemetery, and then Black Disciples Endowment Fund, connected to National Christian Missionary Convention, is also a part of. I get to serve as corporate secretary of that entity, and so these are exciting times. These are exciting times, both right across the landscape. Right, we're all reassessing. Indeed, we God is calling us and giving us the resources to be a new church for this new time, and so Convocation is doing that hard. Risky work, as I say, we're not just looking for low hanging fruit. We're looking for right, what is God calling us to do? Those hard things that are not always kind of at the surface, but that we know, right, are worthwhile. And we're doing that visioning work, right? People don't perish because of tools. They perish because of lack of vision, right? And vision takes hard work, and so. Convocation has been committed over these 2 years, and I've been in the role, I guess, a year and 3 months now, to doing that work of reimagining, right, who we can be together, working together across those entities that are all a part of Convocation, as well as with right, the whole church. There's certainly significant challenges, right, on this landscape, but so many rich opportunities for us all to focus in on.
And that's so exciting. I'm always excited when I hear whatever community constituency that exists in part of the church when we understand that not only must we do the imagining, um,
That's right.
not only must we envision an alternate reality than the one that exists today, right? What
Yeah.
could it look like, and then how do we get there? But the fact that the work is hard, that it's not easy, it won't come without some discerning, some engaging, some hard conversations, quite frankly,
Yeah.
as we move forward. I'm always inspired by the story of Preston Taylor, particularly as a Black disciple, but also just in general, for someone who had such resources that he thought not only of his own future, but of the future of the church
That's right.
and those who would come after, and made provision
That's right.
for that future in ways that are still yielding a great fruit.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to us a little bit, Yvonne, about the Black Disciples Endowment Fund. Exactly what is it? Uh, how are those resources stewarded? And exactly, what does it do? What is it? We have lots of funds in the church. So what is BDEF, as some of us who know it? What
Yeah.
does the Black Disciples Endowment Fund do, and what's its intended purpose?
Absolutely. So, Black Disciples Endowment Fund really is a result of some visioning work from Dr. S. Myers, John Compton, and John Folks, who in the '80s, right, got together and were trying to assess where and how there would be resources for Black congregations to have what they needed, right, to develop. And so, it particularly provides for leadership development, for congregational growth and vitality, and focuses on response to and advocacy for the well-being of the African American community, as well as scholarship assistance. The landscape's changed slightly, a bit since the '80s. But in the '80s, right, they were concerned. Convocation would have goals around. We want to establish, right, so many churches. We want to renew so many churches. We want to call, 10 new leaders, right, to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And this is partly because there were parallel, kind of tracks of development, right? Because our society
Mm-hmm.
and our churches in that society weren't always so integrated. And there was this
Right.
sense in which, right, we don't have access to sort of main pools of resources and funds. And so, we need to establish a legacy fund, right, that will provide in the future for the continued development of Black disciples. They certainly imagine that things would be more integrated and we would grow, right? Because we have a
Mm-hmm.
merger agreement. And I always say, right, during tumultuous times, Preston Taylor, others, right, they didn't sort of run off and start,
Right.
their own thing as a separate entity. But we're always discerning, right, what steps incrementally, right, what steps, major steps, monumental steps do we need to take as well. And so this establishment of BDEF, legacy building means that you believe a future, there's some future to prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
because they believe there was a future to prepare for in terms of leadership development, congregational growth and vitality, advocacy, and then scholarships, they, started some name funds at the Christian Church Foundation in the '80s, and that's grown to about 15 name funds at this point, and certainly well over $1 million. And since '84, BDEF grants have been awarded in over $700,000
Wow.
since that time.
That's an amazing story. I think not only in, as you say, imagining a future and preparing for that future, those leaders in the '80s, who, again, following along that legacy of Preston Taylor, we must always think about those who will come
That's right.
after
That's right.
us, and ensure that that's a future. And I think that's, as we imagine who we are as a new church, I think that's an important part of that work across the church, and even the partnership with the Christian Church Foundation, right? Where I know their goal is to match passion, right, with giving. And
That's
so
right.
if you have resources that you want to share with the church, they are a good steward of so many resources that benefit the church most widely. Share with us a little bit about the recent grant cycle. I know that BDF has just made some grant awards,
Yeah.
and maybe talk a little bit about who some of the recipients are, and what you're excited about with that grant cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, lots of great news to report. Excited that BDEF had kind of been on hiatus for a little few years in terms of not giving out grants, and there's been some updating, and so the grant application is now online, and it's at the National Convocation website, and there's a whole menu that's just dedicated to Black Disciples Endowment Fund. And so that the granting process went online for the first time. We had an information meeting to start out that grant cycle in 2021, where potential grant recipients could come, right, and learn more and ask some questions. And excited to report that 5 grants were awarded through this last cycle. One, the Canaan Christian Church in South Carolina, is actually in one of the most economically depressed areas where there's significant homelessness. And so they received a $5,000 grant to help with their food service efforts there. They have several persons who, have culinary skills, and they're chefs, and they have the food from commercial kitchens, and they bring it over. BDEF is one grantor, but I'm aware that I believe Walmart and some other places have also given gifts to help out there at Canaan Christian Church in South Carolina. And so certainly we're thrilled to support that. And we know, particularly during the pandemic, right, where food scarcity is increased, that we're thrilled to support that effort in what is indeed a Black community and pretty economically depressed. Walk in the Light Christian Church is in the Indianapolis area, and they certainly have been doing a good bit of updating in terms of their technology, but that they also have a special kind of mentoring dimension for young people, right, to learn technology and to grow as leaders in the church through the technology piece. And so they had an exciting proposal, and so the grant provides certainly for some equipment, but also for training needs and the kind of formation, right, of those young people. Another is a Black new church development there, actually headed by Angela White-and-Hill Shields, A.W. Shields in North Carolina, the Root Christian Church. There is seeding and is at the kind of beginning stages. And so we're excited to partner in terms of making the award to the region to be a good steward and to pass that on to the congregation. But one is for leadership development. Another is for the Evangelical Crusade Fishers of Men, are actually our Haitian siblings, and do just some marvelous work in terms of we see immigration issues are before us, Ukraine, Haiti, so many places, right? I really could go on all day, and so $5,000 was given to them, and Sharon Stanley Ray is a part of partnering with them to bring to fruition everything that they intend to carry that piece out. And so BDEF is indeed doing the work, right? That's an advocacy effort. So leadership development, congregational growth, advocacy, all of those things. I'm excited as it reemerges and reopens, that those grants have all been given out. And then one more in California. She goes by Pastor Yanni, and her work there in terms of leadership development also was supported by BDEF. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to share the good news and the good work that these persons are doing.
That's great news. All familiar people and places, and have to give a shout out to Walk in the Light, which is a church plant out of my home church, Light of the World Christian Church, Indianapolis. So know that family, Yanni, and of course many of us know A.W. Shields, who was formerly on the staff of MBA and is just doing good work. But just the range of both of community service, as you say, congregational development, leadership development, and justice work. I think that's just really exciting. So how, as people are going forward, how do you what do you hope rather is going to be accomplished through this, and what's the timeline for maybe the next grant cycle, and what's the long range view for BDEF now that you've sort of returned to a grant making cycle? What do you hope this is going to be able to accomplish for the whole church, not just the convocation?
Absolutely. So I think two things, right? The BDEF, even in terms of being on hiatus and then opening again this cycle, right, is also revisiting and reimagining itself, right, in terms of saying, so what does leadership development look like today? What does congregational growth and vitality, right? How do we nurture that? Do we do one cycle? Maybe we have 2 cycles a year, and just kind of re-examining that. And so the fall is when the next grant cycle will open back up. But indeed, in terms of looking at potential other partners, so that BDEF has also supported Institute of Faith and Life, and worked in partnership with the Office of Black Life and DHM, thinking about fundraising, right? How do we continue to fund these things, and encourage right, the stewardship, where our hearts, our treasure and our hearts are connected. And so I'll just say I always get excited about fundraising, because it's a signal, right, that we're alive. We're alive,
right.
and that we believe and we have confidence in right, what God is bringing to pass. So much so that whatever the amount is, right, we're willing to give from our hearts to support that. And so I think identifying those partnerships across the life of the church today. So we actually met earlier today, and invited them to sort of think about the whole granting and funding landscape, right, across our church, because there are some funds where only general units can apply. There are some that are for individuals, right? There's some, MBA has some for particular kinds of programs. And I think we need to, continue to look at where are those voids, where those, who's at the margins, who's being left out, who, doesn't have access. How do we help folks who say, I don't know how to write a grant? What do you do? What's the process? And so, looking at workshops, and I think that even the process, right, of preparing a grant application really is an exercise in vision work, right? It's an exercise in how do I articulate the marvelous things that God is up to, and that God has placed on my heart. And so I think, I always say granting relationships are not just funding relationships, that those funding relationships, we really hope and pray that they undergird our covenant, because they help us live into the kind of deep spirituality and the deeper relationship building between communities, right, between persons, between disciples, and across all kinds of barriers. So that it's certainly far more about so much more than funding, right? But it's really about how do we undergird those covenantal relationships? How are those relationships, changing, and I think just living into growing capacity.
Right. I think one of the exciting things about any institution or any group that does grant making of this kind, as you said, it's applying for these things as an exercise in envisioning, but it's also a way in which we can offer capacity building in lots of ways, not just financial, but just that developing the ability to imagine something other than what exists, or something beyond what exists, and knowing that there might be institutions or entities like the National Convocation's Black Disciples Endowment Fund that can give wings to some of that work is really important. Inviting us, right, to think beyond what's today. Brueggemann, I love it when he says that the prophet can't just tell us to imagine. The prophet has to remind us that there are things beyond this alternative reality, and what might it look like. And so I think BDF is helping people to sketch out, this is what it might look like, and we're willing to invest in you and help with you. As we close our time, I want to invite you to maybe share with us, as we keep talking about imagining a new church, and we have these 4 areas that we call the 4 imaginings: covenant, the narrative that we're living into it as a church, and I'll be excited along with you to talk about some other work that we're going to do about the church's narrative. How does BDEF help us to not only live into covenant, but perhaps shape a different narrative for the church?
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I will say, I think a couple things is, the generations, right, coming together to do this work. And so in terms of lifting up S.S. Myers, right, and John Folks and John Copton, some names that you may not know. Certainly John Folks is still very active and on the scene. And John Copton, right, they say he was a man of first in terms of serving at DHM, serving Convocation in several roles. But I think connecting those generations in terms of support and accountability
Hmm.
and to create community to live into the new things that God is calling us to. I think it's a huge way in which BDEF does
Yeah.
that.
And many people may or may not know that Jackie Compton Bunch is the daughter
Yeah,
of
yeah,
John Compton. Many people know Jackie. She served the church in
yes,
lots of different ways, but John Compton was her father. And so those stories and continuing that legacy, embracing and honoring where we've been and what we've been given and our challenges to move forward
yeah,
with it in new ways that are relevant for the church that is now and always as not only those leaders in the 80s, but going back as far as, say, Preston Taylor
yeah.
and other people in the church who thought enough about that future
That's right.
to make provision for it, not
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
and I think that that spirit of generosity and provision is something that we also want to lift up.
yeah,
It's important to note, church, that the Easter offering is coming up on April 10th and 17th. That is the special offering that particularly supports the general ministries of the church, of which the National Convocation and the OGMP are both members of the group that are funded uh, part by those offerings. So we want to ensure that you are paying attention, and as you look around the church to see what's happening, the ways in which the general ministries have stepped up during this time of pandemic and transition and reached out to resource needs as well as visions and imaginations. That spirit of support and generosity, we hope that your congregation, that you will make a gift to the Easter offering to support this covenant life that we have together. Wherever we are, two of us, just Yvonne and I on the screen, there's congregation represented here, there's region, and there's general church life represented. So wherever we are, the whole church is always present. So,
mm-hmm.
Yvonne, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to help the church learn more about the Black Disciples Endowment Fund, the good work that is happening there that really strengthens the health and vision of the whole church. Whenever one part of the body is ill, we all suffer. And as long as all parts of the body are healthy, our collective strength is unstoppable. So thank you for the work that you do. And thanks to those who serve on the board of the BDEF.
Amen.
Disciples, we thank you for listening to us today, to this conversation. There will be links posted along with this video where you can learn more, not only about the National Convocation, but also about the Black Disciples Endowment Fund. And we hope that you are moved and inspired to ensure that your congregation is giving to the Easter offering this year, which will be taken in most congregations on April 10th and 17th. It is this connection and covenant life together that we work to support and build together. We can't do it alone. None of us can do it alone. So I hope that you will covenant with us to help continue to make this work, this good work happen. God bless you, saints. And remember, God loves you. Oh, how God loves you. And so do I. We'll see you next time. God bless.